Well, welcome. We're here today with Marcus from Blueberry Funded Trader. It's a pleasure to have you with us at the Prop Association. Thank you for joining us today.
Fantastic. It's good to be here, Jordan. Likewise.
Oh, great. You're our first interview, and it's awesome because it gets us a chance to talk about the Prop Association and Blueberry Funded and, how we can really revolutionize this industry, which has been, just blowing up all over the place. And it's really an awesome time to be part of it. Super exciting. So thank you for joining us today.
No, it's good to be here. I think, look, we're really excited to be, the first, official prop firm member, getting the show on the road for the Prop Association. And look, it's early days, but this is, a very overdue, kind of project and entity that I think is only going to add a lot of value to the prop space. And yeah, we're excited to be on board and, help it grow and, get more members on and, really sort of push us to the forefront of the industry to, bring a voice to traders and to prop firms as well.
Awesome. So let me start with that in a little bit and ask you to kind of introduce Blueberry Funded and explain how you all came from a brokerage into the funded trader space and kind of what made you guys move into that direction and at least how you guys are standing out from all the competition out there because there are quite a number of prop firms and you guys are one of the most prominent out there these days.
Yeah, there's more by the day, and it's just when you think the industry may slow down a bit, it has another sort of wave of new firms coming in. But look, it's a great question. I mean, me personally, my background is in retail, regulated brokerage, out of Australia. So mostly in my background, I worked with brokers on the technology, infrastructure, liquidity, and risk side of the space. And then, naturally over time, as this prop industry started to grow, a lot of prop firms, great at marketing, great at promoting and running communities, not great at the tech side. So they would come to brokers and broker I worked at the time to, integrate trading platforms, get liquidity. And that was my direct exposure to the space. And, likewise, separately, Blueberry on the brokerage side, who I wasn't working with at the time, started getting into the prop space by offering those same services. Over time, I then personally went into more of the technology, white labeling, consulting side of the industry, which is a good learning experience, working with 30, 40 plus prop firms, in the space of a year and a half, you see a lot of what works and a lot of what doesn't work. And I think at that time, 2 years ago, a lot of things weren't working and sort of the cracks were starting to become visible in how a lot of these firms are being operated. And I think when you're on a consulting side, you or a technology side, you really focus on, quantity of clients. You want as many people coming in and signing up. But I kind of had not an epiphany, but kind of a realization, look, the space is always going to gravitate towards a consolidation of quality players ultimately. And either, it's better to help make the quality players or to become one. And I think that was sort of my original idea for this. Coincidentally, around that time, I started talking to the team at Blueberry Markets, who I've known for quite a long time, an excellent management team with a lot of industry experience. And they'd had that experience in the prop space doing liquidity, technology, trading platform services. But kind of they'd come to that same realization that I think what traders need at this point in time is a much more sustainable, stable offering. To trade with that they have long-term confidence in that their simulated capital, and their trading is safe. So we sort of at that point we're coming to that same realization of a broker-backed prop firm, something that's really important that traders are going to be after and is going to give them that sustainability. And essentially, we were proven right on that very quickly. I always say to people the last 6-7 months or so, we've just been playing catch up with the demand. We have a bit more breathing room now, which is really good. But I think ultimately the thing that sets us apart from other prop firms and broker-backed prop firms, because, as much as I'd like to think we were one of the earlier ones to come into the space, 9 months ago to do broker-backed, really these days any broker based in the middle of the ocean no one's heard of can add a prop firm to their offering and say they're a broker-backed prop firm. And that's not the same thing as, being backed by a large, regulated, global entity that has a lot of experience. So I think what we've done differently, or what our strategy really works on, is that we aim to be the best of both worlds. I think a lot of brokers out there, even very established great brokers, just attach a prop firm to their offering and don't really give it the attention or care that it needs, because it is a different product and it has its nuances that make it very different to running a brokerage. And if you have that approach, it generally doesn't work. We've seen some very large brokers start and shut down prop programs within a few months because I think they think it's going to be a walk in the park, when there's actually a lot more complexities to it. It's easy to look at the space, and so far it's been run by a lot of influencers, educators and content creators. But that's not to say that it's an easy thing to do. There is a lot of nuance and depth to it, but at the same time, there is a lot of great technical benefit that a broker can bring to this space, whether it's trading platforms, access to better liquidity and execution, and just a better understanding of compliance and legalities, and policy and things like that. So I think what we aim to do is be the best of both worlds. I've had a few years of experience in the prop space. A lot of our staff have experience in the prop space that we've brought on to work with us, but obviously a lot of experience on the broker side. So we sort of want to make it really bring the best of what makes prop firms already great, and what brokers can bring to the table together and do it very efficiently. And I think based on the results we've seen over the last 9 months, that's really played out to be true and what traders are after. So sorry, a bit of a rant. I always tend to do that, as people will probably tell you. But it's been quite a journey over the last 9 months. And look, we're only really getting started. I think we've just been playing catch up, and we have a lot more new ideas and things we want to bring to the table. As it is a very fast moving, quick industry, and there's so much more value to bring to traders out there.
Yeah. So with your newness into the space, I mean, being at it for less than a year. But you're also backed by one of the most well-known brokerages in the area. How are you able to communicate, communicate your value to the customers as far as the surety that they have? Because a lot of the traders, they worry about the different firms and they worry about whether they're going to be able to trust them. And that's one of the big things that we're trying to establish with the Prop Association. But how have you been able to leverage the Blueberry brand to be able to kind of get through, especially in such a short period of time? Because ultimately, it must be happening since you're growing so quickly.
Yeah, and look, it's an interesting one, because as much as a lot of our growth has been on the back of being backed and part of the corporate group of a very established broker, we do want the offering to stand on its own two legs. That's, like I said before, the problem I think a lot of other broker-backed prop firms did is they said, look, we're a huge broker, we have big brand presence, here's our prop firm. And that's great to give people some sort of sense of security, but I think you still need to go above and beyond that. Look, initially, I think the thing is, it's one thing to just, be backed by a large broker and say you're broker backed, but it's how you actually communicate that value, which I think is a good point that you brought up. With us, look, it came down to offering the same trading conditions the traders have access to on the brokerage side of the business. And that's coming down to some very good raw spread pricing and execution. And we can offer that because obviously having access to that regulated entity, which has even more access to a lot of top tier liquidity providers, allows us to really share in the benefits of that and sort of have that economy of scale. Most prop firms out there, even very big prop firms, that are very successful, because they sort of don't have that access or connection. Ultimately, their pricing is usually a plug and play out of the box solution, doesn't have a lot of depth. I think if you go sort of over a certain volume, you're going to see quite excessive slippage in that. And look, it's all backed by the data at the end of the day. A lot of industry pages and bodies have sort of done the analysis, and we do come out quite on top of a lot of lists when it comes to execution and spread. So look, for us, when it comes to being broker backed and using the Blueberry name, it's not just a slogan on a website. It's about actually telling traders what it means to be broker backed. Because something we always forget is, I come from the broker space, so my natural thinking is like broker first usually, just because that's my background. But a lot of traders out there in the prop space, like, their whole interaction with trading has been through prop firms first. So some people don't even understand, and it's quite sort of common sense to me, but like a lot of people out there don't actually know what a broker is or what the benefit of being broker backed is. And so we have to communicate that quite clearly. But nevertheless, the way we've done it does convey that there is a lot more benefit to traders joining a broker backed firm, especially when backed by Blueberry, than a lot of the other options out there. But I think the main thing that we try to do is, our biggest thing is our commitment to sustainability in the space. Again, when we started this, the reason for starting a broker-backed firm, it's not just the security that, there's more money behind it or there's a larger entity behind it that has, a longer track record. That is very important, but it's also about using the resources, the data and the analysis to make sure that the plans we offer and the business that we're offering, is sustainable for both us, but sustainable for the traders as well. This industry has become very much a race to the bottom casino style model at the end of the day. Which traders a lot of the time love. I mean, who wouldn't? It's very easy to pass challenges, excessive leverage, things like that. And on the face of it, a lot of retail traders, see that as the direct value, but it's kind of a false narrative, in the sense that, we believe trading is actually quite difficult, and it is. A lot of only a minority of traders are very successful over the long term, and our rules reflect that. We're not here to try and sugarcoat it, turning into like fantasy football or a game. We really want to encourage sound, responsible trading, and we make that quite clear on the site. Because for us, it's about playing the long game here. Everyone in the prop space comes in to make the quick money. By the time they realize the strategy they've done to get that quick money isn't sustainable, they blow up or have to change the rules drastically, which really kind of cheats and rug pulls traders. So with us, look, we've come in sort of firm. We've built these sustainable conservative challenges that encourage risk-adjusted, sustainable trading. And, again, it's not just marketing. It's not just a slogan. Ultimately, 9 months in, we look at the data. And it's hard to know definitively just because there's not a lot of published industry information out there. But our funded trader profitability rate is, 50, 60, sometimes up to double the industry average. So look, it's one of those ones that it can be a bitter pill to swallow, as a trader saying, well, why would I trade with you when I get all this leverage, all this drawdown, pretty much an easy pass over here. And the thing is, well, because we, as much as we want our firm to be around for 1 to 2 years, we actually want you to be trading with us and be sustainable for 1 to 2 years as well, and not, participate in this race to the bottom. And I think that, look, it's something that, I'll be completely honest, probably has lost us some popularity. It's probably lost us some sales, but I think the people who trade with us are very committed because they respect the fact that we have a commitment to sustainability and teaching sustainable trading as well in what we offer. So that's sort of how we've used this broker-backed message, not just to, slap the broker name on it and start selling cheap challenges with high drawdowns, but to actually, much in line with what has been a very long-term brand, make a long-term product that, ensures traders that, Blueberry funded and their simulated capital won't just be here in, 6 to 12 months, but 6 to 12 years and beyond. And that's really how we've built this from the ground up to sort of present that message to traders.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed when I looked through the site, I saw that some of the types of trading that you don't allow for, whether it's excessive scalping or, having no risk management positions through like grid trading, you're very clear because you want to have you want the traders to use proper risk management. And one of the things that we've heard across the industry is that, as you said, firms that allow for excessive leverage or they don't have the appropriate risk management strategies in place, they're the ones that run the highest risk of folding when, something goes awry, whether it is, a collective set of traders working against the firm or other nefarious actors working against it, or just simply things that, happen as outside events. Whether it's something like, the 2015 Swiss franc change or other items that can really dislocate the market and cause some upheaval within it. So I think it's an important facet to be able to have those risk management strategies. I know it's a little odd for me to ask this, but do you feel that some of the other firms, because they had something like 50 firms disappear in 2024, prop firms throughout the world, do you feel that a lot of it comes down to some of it is the risk management strategies that they use and employ to choose the traders and how they allow them through the challenge program?
Very much so. Look, there's a whole myriad of reasons why I think firms went down in 2024. Look, that's the obvious one is the risk management because everyone came in. And look, I think one of the best things about prop firms is that it is an e-commerce user experience. It's so simple to understand. You come in, you purchase a challenge, put your credit card details in, you buy it. It's a very rapid way to get someone from website to trading, and that's a great user experience. But like I always say, a lot of the things in the prop space, the things that make it really great are a double-edged sword and can make it terrible as well. And the problem with it was a lot of people treated this industry, people running prop firms treat it purely as an e-commerce business. You're running an e-commerce business, you want to sell, I don't know, more t-shirts or something, you discount the price, you do BOGO offers, things like that. And That's great for e-commerce, but in this industry, there is another side to the equation, which is the risk that you're taking on. And I think, looking at it from an e-commerce perspective, they're like, well, I'm going to make it easier to pass, I'm going to give more leverage, and I'm going to lower the prices. And that doesn't really work in this industry. But I would even argue that the main narrative that we have now in the space is incorrect. Even what people consider a vanilla prop firm challenge, I still think is a bit too loose. But it's hard to identify that, when sort of everyone's acting in a certain way. But I think what was really interesting about 2024 was just poor business management as well. You can take the risk side of it out of it. The main thing that really took a lot of firms down last year was they didn't have really any business continuity plan. Like, their biggest platform went down, and within 1 or 2 weeks they were wiped out. Really, it sort of showed the simplicity with which they were approaching the business from a payments, technology, business continuity, and just sort of diversification risk as well. We really sort of see that happen quite a lot. But what's interesting is that I think, we haven't seen the end of it. I think, like you brought up a really good point before about the Swiss National Bank decision, and I keep saying, because everyone's like, oh, okay, look, the chaos has died down a bit, there's a bit more, things are a bit steadier, but a lot of firms, even ones that might masquerade as being very successful, that traders love, a lot of them do operate on razor-thin margins, essentially, from people I've talked to, from a lot of, sometimes rumors, so you take them with a grain of salt and things out there. And what's interesting about that is their business might continue for now on a thin margin. It's all good. They keep paying out traders and everyone's happy. But, the disruption that happened last year was just one platform. Well, there's a lot of different disruptions, but losing one platform. I often think, because again, this industry hasn't seen an SNB or something like that. And they're not common, to be honest. But I think a lot of people think, all right, we've worked out the prop model. We know how to do it, in a stable way, even if it's a low profit margin business. But an SNB happens and you're finished. Like we saw back then in brokers, and how they were managing risk. And so that's sort of one of those sort of sleeping giants, I think, in this industry, that we're gonna, see shocks to the system which will just push firms out instantly. So I don't think the chaos is over. To be honest. But again, I think what's important is that there are, and not just Blueberry funded, of course, there are better actors in the space now that are looking at sustainability, and, a lot more things like that, who do have conservative challenges, who are looking to shift the narrative ultimately. So, I guess to answer your question, I think we're seeing sort of, we've seen a lot of poor risk management on the prop firm side in the space for a while, and we're still seeing it, but there's a lot more to be uncovered, which I think will happen in the next 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, I think, especially with some of the geopolitics and things, the realignment that, living in America, I get to see all the real-time chaos that's being, dispelled across the world. It has the potential to really change the way, markets, interact with one another, and you could easily have a one-off event that, they talk about a one-in-a-century event happening with, without any problem happening. So I think that's really important to understand. As we start to look at, though, the fragmented nature of the industry, right? Because everybody operates their own models, you said. We operate in different countries, we have different regulations. I think it becomes important that we have some sort of self-regulation, and I think that's one of the things that the proposition we're trying to establish is to get ahead of it, because ultimately, if we don't, one of these countries or one of these regulators, whether it's in Europe, or the United States, or Australia, or otherwise, is going to set the rules of the road if we don't do it first. Now, do you see that happening do you see that happening sooner rather than later, or is it something that you're seeing kind of roll downhill like a snowball, getting larger and larger and larger, eventually just waiting to kind of hit us all at once?
Yeah, look, it's hard to say, because again, I've been asked this question like multiple times, like every day for the last 2-3 years, like, when's regulation coming? And my guess is as good as anyone's. I've spoken, gotten a lot of different legal counsel and advice over the years on the matter of regulation and what it could look like in the prop space. And even after spending a lot of money on that, more than I'd care to say, the answer is ultimately still, we just don't know. And that's the thing about regulation. Sometimes it looks really obvious, like, oh, surely they have to do, X, Y, and Z very soon, and they don't. And other times when you think it's not going to come for a while, out of nowhere it happens. So it's like trading a market. At the end of the day, you just don't know when it's going to come and what it's going to look like. I mean, that being said, what I will say from, talking to people and things like that, I know that if it was to be regulated, potentially we might see it first come from, somewhere like Europe, where it gets slotted in alongside existing, CFD brokerage, market making permission licenses is a similar thing to that. Again, what that means and what that looks like, very hard to say. I do know as well, sort of with recent sort of changes, obviously in politics in the US, some people have put forward that, a lot of regulators in the US aren't necessarily focusing on new areas or new niche business types for sort of regulatory things. But again, these are all, rumors. Take them with a grain of salt. So you never really know at the end of the day. But ultimately, even if it gets regulated, I think a lot of people in the space forget that, much like in the broker space, a lot of people just operate offshore anyway. Ultimately, so it could all get regulated and people just move their business operations offshore. Things might become a bit dicier or harder for them when it comes to payments, marketing, and other things. But that's also the elephant in the room that I think no one really talks about. Is everyone always says, oh, well, if regulation comes along, it's going to affect how we do compliance, prop firms like to get licenses. But the thing I think a lot of them are forgetting is sort of how it impacts your marketing, because a lot of prop firms have been able to benefit from very e-commerce style marketing with Google ads and meta ads. And look, a lot of their growth is based off the back of that. Look, at Blueberry Funded, look, obviously we do that. We do various forms of marketing, but, we're more based on, partnerships, affiliates, and, just because I come from the broker space, I see that as a much more long-term sustainable relationship method of growth. But some of these firms out there, 50, 60, 70% of their clients come from online ads. Now, if regulation comes in, especially say somewhere like Europe, and I think a lot of brokers might know what I'm referring to here, your ability to run ads becomes a lot harder. You have to jump through a lot more hoops. The ROAS just declines or degrades, and you're not getting as much, value for money like we've seen in the prop space. And to me, that is something that could blow up a lot of these prop firms. If you really cut off the, sort of turn the tap off for them, that could cause liquidity issues. So I think when people talk about regulation, look, obviously the compliance, acquisition of a license, things like that are not always easy and they are a lot of work. But I think a lot of firms that they could do that. I don't think it's unrealistic to think that they, they can do that. But, if their marketing channels get cut off or, get flipped around, that could present a big issue for some of the firms out there that heavily rely on just churning ads and on Facebook and Instagram and things like that. But yeah, getting back to the main point, I don't know what regulation looks like or when it comes. I thought it would be a lot more immediate a year or two ago. We haven't seen that happen. And I think because of maybe recent political movements, it might be delayed even further, given I think there's a lot of other more pertinent things out there in the world right now, as I'm sure people watching are aware. So, but that's why I think, the need for an industry body like the Prop Association has never been more necessary. And I think it's a perfect way to start, because in a way, the great thing about industry associations are, they actually invite a lot of feedback from traders directly and from the business side as well, usually more so than regulators do, in my experience. And so I think, especially considering this has been such a community-driven industry, I almost think that an association launching first before regulation is actually a good thing to help sort of guide the way, and give voice to the business owners and, to the traders' customers as well. So I think this is the best step in that direction in general, given where regulation's at right now.
Well, let me ask you this. If you were able to speak to the traders out there, what would you say is the biggest thing that they don't understand about the prop side? And from the prop side, or from the traders' perspective, what do you think that a lot of the firms don't understand about it from the traders' perspective, or that a lot of props or in the prop industry miss?
That's a really good question. And I think, look, what traders need to realize about the prop space is, like I was saying earlier, because a firm makes it easier to pass, or it's kind of a bit of reverse logic in a way. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, if you're looking at this as a retail product. But I would say in this industry, there's kind of a few lines that if you cross in building a prop firm challenge, even though as a trader it might seem good for you, like more leverage, more drawdown, things that in theory would make your trading, would make it easier for you to get a payout, which is the goal of any trader at the end of the day, is to earn money from it. Just because it's easier doesn't actually mean it's a better product for you long term, in a way, because that doesn't teach sustainable trading. So you might blow up, or, in that sense, your simulated capital with a prop firm isn't safe. But also, it's not sustainable for the prop firm as well to operate in that manner. So, that's something that it's hard to get over. And I completely get where traders are coming from, because I think they've been misled by a false narrative, because these guys running prop firms like e-commerce stores just keep going lower, cheaper, racing to the bottom, and now traders think, oh well, this is normal. This is normal for a prop firm to offer a challenge like this, and so it's not really their fault ultimately. Like, they're just traders, they're consumers, customers out there looking for a great product. But it's annoying when, I always joke to people, I could, I could sell Ferraris for 10 grand. I would be the most popular Ferrari dealer in the world. Customers would love me, but I would run the most unsustainable, terrible business ever. And that's exactly it's such a drastic, analogy, but that's kind of what's happening in the prop space. When you offer challenges for certain prices with certain leverage and certain drawdowns, it's not a realistic product. But I don't think traders realize that, because they haven't seen any differently. And that's what we're here to try and rebuild that narrative and educate traders on how the mechanics of the business work. But on the other side, what do prop firm owners or the people running these businesses need to understand about the traders, and what some of them may miss? Look, I think ultimately they need to realize that I think prop firms are only one part of a trader's journey. It is a separate product. And brokers need to understand this too, in a way. Like, I don't see brokers and prop firms as competitors necessarily. I see them as and products, not all products. I think it's every trader's goal to ultimately want to trade their own capital. But a lot of them don't have the capital to start with, so they do a prop firm challenge to get a payout. And I think that's something that a lot of people running prop firms need to understand. And it's very easy to see this as this race to the bottom, casino style, model where you're just trying to keep people churning accounts and doing that. I get why a lot of prop firms, might think like that, but I think they also need to understand the needs of the traders are much more long term. And look, I guess we have the benefit of being connected to a regulated broker, and we're doing a lot more things in that space to sort of build bridges and a real ecosystem within the corporate group. For example, we're very soon to release a brokerage payout option. So if someone, wants a payout from their Blueberry funded, funded account, they can have that withdrawn directly to a markets brokerage account as well, because ultimately they want to extend that journey, trade their own capital and have more flexibility, and we want to be there to provide that for them. Because I think, look, the prop space, and you could say this about the broker space too, it's there's a certain threshold you reach, and the industry doesn't change that much. There's only so much you can do as a broker. But the thing about the prop space is I think people have hit that that wall, thinking, well, this is the product, it's a challenge. And a lot of the offerings have become quite vanilla in that sense. But I do think there's a lot more out there that can be offered to traders. And, this isn't the end of the product cycle such. So I think prop firm owners need to, be a bit more imaginative about that and understand that the trader's journey is longer and bigger than just what they offer in their business. And I think the ones who are going to be successful long term, and, fingers crossed, and we're hoping with our strategy, Blueberry Funded is one of those, that's kind of the direction that I think a lot of firms should be going in.
Awesome. So let me ask you a little bit about, so we've noticed that and you can correct me if this hasn't happened, but I suspect that it has, is that we've started to see the rise of, I'll call it collectives of traders that are trying to work against prop firms. Really, they're just bad actors that are trying to take advantage of it, whether it is through, group reviews to try and bring down the trust that they have, or that traders have in a prop firm. And it's one of the things we're working to combat through the Prop Association. But tell us a little bit about any experiences you all have had with that, and kind of what it's done and how it's been.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, the things that make this industry, the prop industry, great, also are a double-edged sword and can make it bad as well. It goes in either direction, and we've seen a lot of this out there. Like, I think what's great about we have Discords, we have the huge Prop X community, which are so vibrant, but at the same time, we've seen a lot of these, I don't know how to describe them, so-called community pages, which are, meant to represent the traders' interests, bring up issues with prop firms, make them public, make traders aware if there's anything dodgy going on out there, and, aim to give traders a voice. Myself and a lot of other prop firm owners have come to the realization over time, a few things, whether these pages were always like this or they've changed over time, they're ultimately moneyed interests. They'll post misinformation or a very random claim that someone makes on X. And they've realized, I think, over time that to feed the machine and the algorithm, controversy, fear and lies spreads faster than, positive, true news. And they've really tapped into that to the point where, look, we've had misinformation spread about us. And look, we don't want to respond to people publicly and sort of, stoop to that low of, unprofessionalism. But we'll message these pages directly and be like, hey, we love what you do. We love that you're, trying to inform traders more. But what you said isn't correct. And here's all the evidence clear as day. And we've literally had replies of people saying, oh, well, the post has already gotten too much engagement for us to take down. I'm like, okay, so you're, or they'll say something else of, please pay us to take it down. And I'm like, okay, so that's the game you're playing. It's you don't have traders' interests at heart. You don't care about giving them a voice. It's become moneyed interest at the end of the day, which is really a shame because a lot of people look to these pages thinking what they're saying is true. And that's why, look, I've felt this way about these pages for a long time regardless, but I think that's why the Prop Association, being run by professionals with a lot of industry experience, with members joining, who have faces to the business, or to the association, like yourself, and people who've worked in this industry for a long time, is really good. A lot of these pages out there are faceless purely for the reason that they can extort and blackmail prop firms and not have any legal repercussions. But with the Prop Association, it's really a two-way street. It's giving a voice to traders to air their concerns. It's letting the businesses and the prop firms join this association to collaborate on things as well. And I think that's a much more structured, professional way of giving value and a voice to traders than random call-outs on X that are unsubstantiated and really there to just blackmail prop firms and make money and mislead traders ultimately. So we've had a lot of negative experiences with those. And look, I think the good thing is, the good part of it is traders are starting to wake up to that. I think these pages that might have been good a few years ago have now completely devolved into just spreading lies, and traders, are a lot smarter than I think these pages may think they are, and they're now seeing through it. And they need something like this, and even haven't spread the news too much about it because it's still very new. But people I've talked about saying there's an industry association coming, whether they're affiliates or a few traders, and they think this is really amazing. So I think it's the right time, both with where the industry is and where the needs of traders are as well. So I think it's a net positive, like massively for the space.
Yeah, because I think, we're adding in another layer of dispute resolution, but at the end of the day, everybody does for the most part try to work in good faith with the traders and the members of the association. We aren't always going to be able to solve every single issue, and that is just the way it is. But I feel that if we can transparently produce a process that everybody can work through, that is the best solution, because it's like anything else. Even in a heavily regulated industry, there's never going to be 100% satisfaction. And especially as you pointed out with this kind of race to the bottom, there are going to be traders that find themselves left out in the cold. And sometimes we will have members that may drop off of the association because they haven't met our criteria to be in good standing. And, so I think that's why it's important that we have these self-regulated bodies like ourselves that use industry professionals that bring in, really high quality firms, and we talk about these issues openly amongst ourselves and with the traders so they can see and make the most, informed decisions that they possibly can. Because at the end of the day, it is a two-way street. They are our customers, and we are there to provide for them in the same way that we do it for everybody else. So let me ask you kind of like some other questions to kind of close this out. As far as where you see things going in the next few years, I mean, like I said, you guys have been only around for less than a year. You're obviously trying very diligently to build out something that will sustain for 5, 10, 15, 20, beyond when both of us retire. What does that look like to you, and where do you see the prop industry moving in the next, 5 to 10 years?
Of course. So look, in terms of Blueberry Funded, like our main goal is rebuilding that narrative. Like I think we've sacrificed a lot of short-term sales, and you might deem it success, in some degree. We've sacrificed that in order to rebuild the narrative and really show traders that sustainability of a prop firm is linked to more conservative challenges, and that's going to be our mission for a long time and scale alongside that. Like our motto is chase the hard money. I think a lot of prop firms out there, everyone's chasing the easy money, trying to get on the trend with us. Look, Blueberry as a brand has been around for almost 10 years. And we know what it's like as a brand to build things that last slowly over time. I mean, because the same thing happened in the brokerage space. You look back in the early to mid 2010s, how many, white label, MetaTrader brokers there were out there, and how many of those, are left today. We saw this clean out, and we knew it was the people that put the long term first, and sacrificed in the short term that ended up being the most successful. So look, that's still going to be our motto and mantra and how we operate. Look, I think in terms of what we do, like I was saying earlier, we want to extend past the offering we have now. Like I said, we're just getting started. The last 6 months has been keeping up with demand, streamlining, scaling processes, and trying to shift that industry narrative. But now, we're looking to do a lot of things to grow that trader's journey and ecosystem as a brand. We have the prop firm here. That's for people who want to come in with less capital, in order to get a payout. There's the brokerage side of the business too, which is obviously for people that have more capital to get started, and it's maybe something they can use a lot more flexibly. So we're looking for more products to extend that trader's journey and give more options to traders to have it all, under one roof. So that's what we're trying to do on our side, and within that, offer a lot more value to people, as traders with new asset classes. We just released stock CFD challenges the other week, and we're looking into some new things as well. So it's about sort of expanding asset classes as well, where I think we're going to see some really cool ideas with Blueberry Funded and in the industry as well happen in the next few years. But I think for the industry as a whole, I think, look, we'll see consolidation. I think, look, it is still relatively easy for someone to set up a prop firm from scratch. But I think what we're going to see in terms of changes in trading platform policy, a lot of payment providers, waking up to this industry and seeing it's not just e-commerce and it really is sort of a retail trading product. We're going to see it harder to operate these firms, which will lead to a consolidation, which means firms that have more capital, more stable foundation, and essentially good business continuity in place are going to be more successful. So I do believe in a consolidation, expansion into new assets, and we're really driving that home as well with more specific product releases, and real ecosystem play within the wider group to support traders. So that's what's on the horizon for us.
Gosh, and let me just ask it is. If you had one thing that you wanted traders to know about Blueberry and kind of what your value is that you bring to them above anybody else, what would that be?
Yeah, definitely. And it's like I said earlier, it's a bit of reverse logic to get through to people because, look, I think people see us, they look at our challenges, they think it's strict, they think it's conservative, and, that doesn't always sit well with them, or it's a bitter pill to swallow, like I said. But I think the thing I'd always communicate to traders is, all of that isn't there for us, like, we're being mean or something like that, or we don't, value the clients. It's actually the opposite in that, and it's really sort of hard to communicate that because, the basic ethos in really any product-led business is, if you value the customer, give them a better product. But I think as I said, what's defined as a good product in this industry is incorrect, and we really need to reshift that narrative. So I always ask traders to know that the challenges we do, they come from a good place of us wanting people to trade more sustainably, for the firm to be more sustainable, and really make prop firms educational to an extent, because that's the thing that really drew me to the space in the first place was, you come in, you trade, you have these parameters, you see them updated in real time, and it forces you to an extent to be a better trader. And I think the space has moved away from that a lot, obviously in favor of this casino race to the bottom style of business. So I always say to traders that do dig a bit deeper when it comes to looking at the products. Stop and think for a moment about the easier it is to sort of get what you're after being a payout. Does that actually imply that the prop firm you're trading with is more or less sustainable? And maybe reevaluate things based on that. But that's the big thing I aim to communicate to traders. And what's great about that is, like, we're seeing other firms come in, which is good about this space. I think it is very collaborative, a bit more than the broker space. I think a lot of prop firms, like I speak to a lot of prop firm owners, quite open with each other, and we're seeing sort of a change in direction to sustainability and more conservative challenges as well. So that's really great to see. So I think that message is starting to spread out there, and traders are wising up to know, if it sounds too good to be true, probably is. So it's kind of great for us to be moving that direction as an industry, and that's what we're really trying to drive home, what we do and with our traders, and communicate that message.
Yeah, I mean, as a trader myself, it's really nice to hear. I've taught dozens, probably hundreds of traders at this point, and I always say, if you can't make money with a $500 account. You have no business trying to make money with a $50,000 account. And it's that constant need to make money as soon as possible. I think that really hurts traders. And if you go a little slower and you do it in a more sustainable fashion, it builds a stronger, more robust trading experience. And in this case, for the for Blueberry, I think it would create a more beneficial relationship for a lot of them if they really took the time to actually, look beyond, like you said, the basics of what they're dealing with and see what's driving the sustainability for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the data supports it too. It's not just marketing tactics or something to splash across the website. I find it very very interesting because, like I said, we sort of have quite a high funded trader profitability rate compared to the industry average. So people might always criticize or come from the other side saying, "Oh, your challenges are made really hard to make traders fail essentially." And look, we don't sugarcoat it. They're there in plain sight. We don't want to hide anything. We want to make sure as a trader that you read those rules and make sure that we're the prop firm for you that's going to fit with your strategy, because we know different firms suit different needs of traders at the end of the day. But it's great to see the data reconfirm our vision in that when traders get funded with us, it might be a bit harder to get funded, but once they're funded and use those rules, they are generally more profitable on average. And what's even more interesting about that is we're just doing the sort of analysis on March, and kind of like you were saying, it's about taking it slow. I mean, that's ultimately what being a trader is about. We look at the data of who gets more payouts, or what kind of trader gets more payouts, or what kind of trader passes. It's people that take a bit longer to really get it done. People that have a very conservative risk reward ratio in their trading, or really, we really see patience pay off in the data. And I mean, what's really interesting too is like our one step challenge has like the higher pass rate of anything we offer, and it's the most conservative product we offer in terms of lower leverage and tighter drawdowns as well. So yeah, I find it's kind of interesting in that. So even without all the complexities of the rule, it's like of all of our rules and stuff, the best passing challenge is the one that has even the more conservative conditions, because I think that's ultimately what it is to be a trader, is being patient, conservative, and risk adjusted will lead to long-term success. And our rules reflect that at the end of the day in both our vision and in the data as well. So like we're really excited to see that pan out exactly how we thought it would, in line with our predictions and our forecasts. So yeah, and it's good to hear the feedback from traders as well, saying like you actually promote people to be better traders, and it's not just a game or fantasy football casino style business like other prop firms. So that feedback is sort of means the world to us, and we're looking to continue in that direction. Because for the first few months, it's easy to be like, oh, we could do what all these other firms are doing and just double, triple sales overnight or something like that. But that's not worth it, because you might double or triple your sales, but you're also double, tripling your risk, or you're not running sustainably, and that's of no value to the traders at the end of the day.
Right. Now, let me ask you this as we kind of wrap things up. Um, why did you guys want to be one of the first for the Prop Association? We're starting out here. We're bringing on new members. We're obviously very excited to have Blueberry on with us. But what kind of, appeals to you about the Prop Association, what we're doing?
Look, I think coming from the broker space, and being backed by a regulated broker, we respect the role that regulation compliance plays in this industry. And very similarly, like our whole core commitment has been to sustainability. We put sustainability, long-term sustainability, above short-term profits in that sense. So to see an industry body come about, an industry association, like the Prop Association, we want to jump on it quite quickly. And I think, sort of our discussions really came up at that same time. It was sort of a happy coincidence in a way, because we were looking out at the space and I was like, I'm, very annoyed by these community pages, or whatever you want to call them, spreading misinformation, and it makes the job of prop firms harder, and because they don't listen to you, and it also makes it misleads traders as well. So I was looking at that at that time, and trying to think what outside of a prop firm can help promote sustainability, because obviously we can keep preaching our message of sustainability, but there's always going to be a perceived conflict in that, because we're ultimately running a business here. So any message to reshape the whole industry is always going to be, to an extent, geared towards our own success as a business. So I was already having thoughts in my head around this, and then I think, when we had the initial conversations, I'm like, this is 100% hit the nail on the head, perfect what this industry needs right now. There's no regulation here, or there's no sign of it coming. A lot of misinformation out there. Traders don't have a proper avenue or voice to express their concerns or have their issues resolved via an independent third party of actual industry professionals with backgrounds in various parts of the trading industry. So it just ticked all the boxes, and as I said, hit the nail on the head right at the perfect time in this space. So we really wanted to jump on it because at the end of the day, all it does is, I think, reinforce our message of sustainability. So if we can work with someone who is a third party to help spread that message and obviously give more voice to prop firms and to traders, we're all for it. I think it's the right thing at the right time that this industry needs.
Awesome. Well, yeah, and that's really what we're trying to do here is, give those voices and let people make the decision based on the information they have, and letting them decide for themselves. So, listen, I really appreciate it, and the Prop Association really appreciates your time today. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a wonderful interview, and we're happy to have you with us.
Fantastic. We're really excited to be part of it, and we're very keen for the launch and everything that's going ahead. And very keen for more members to come on board and help spread this message, and for traders to see the value in it as well. So thanks for the chat. It's been really good, and looking forward to the future.